Hey guys, welcome to another episode. Today I have another VBA tutorial for you, and we're going to be making this tool that would allow us to create a folder structure from a list of folders and subfolders within Excel. So in my current job, I am engaged in a lot of due diligence processes, and for all of those we need like a pretty vast folder structure for the data room where all the data is provided by the target. What I noticed is that at first I thought that I can just create this structure once and then just copy paste it with empty folders for each of the targets. But those structures vary a bit from time to time, and also for different projects they can be quite different. So instead of just going every time and creating folder by folder, which is quite tedious and quite boring, and pretty much when you have to create like 20, 30, 40, 50 folders, you always miss something. So I decided to just go ahead and prepare this macro, which would allow me to just have a simple list of my folders and subfolders in Excel. And the macro would allow me to pick a destination folder and it will go through and create all those folders. Let's just go ahead and dive straight into Excel. Here I have a folder structure that I've prepared for the exercise, and those can be quite extensive, but the idea is to create a macro that no matter the folder structure, just select it and it would create these folders in a specific folder that I select before that. So let's go ahead and first make sure you have the developer tab. If you don't have it, as I have it hidden now, just right click, customize the ribbon and just check it here. It's going to show up, and then we can open the Visual Basic for Application Editor. This is where we'll be developing our tool, and you can see here that I have the folder structure file, the one that we had opened, and Magnimetrics tools. This is a toolbox that I've been developing, but I want this macro to be available within any file that I open. And for this reason, we'll need the personal XOSB file, and we don't see that here. So just gonna minimize that, and in order to get that, and you only need to do it once if you haven't done any macros before that, just go ahead, hit record macro, and here we need to select personal macro workbook. Okay, so let's record our macro. Stop recording. And now I can delete that, and if I save, there's no issues because the macro is not within this workbook. Now, if we go ahead and open our editor, we can see that here we have our personal XLSB VBA project. And this is a file that will be loaded every time you open Excel in the background. So you don't get like the typical Excel view, but you have all your macros there. Let's go ahead and create a new user form, and this user form is going to be our interface. Go ahead and rename it to create folders. Okay, and we also need to change this here, the caption, make that create folders from list. Okay, we're going to need a few things here, and need this toolbox to add them. So the first thing I want to do is I want to have a huge button for selecting the folder where everything will be stored. So I'm going to name this button browse button, and the caption here is going to be self-explanatory. So select parent folder for directories. Okay, awesome. The next thing we need is I want to have the selected path here. I'm going to add a label. Click once and it's going to allow you to change it, or you can just go here and change it in the caption. This is going to be my selected path. I want to be able to see that. Just position it a bit better. Okay, and then I'll have an input box where my path will be shown. Extend that, and this is going to be called path text box. The next thing we need is another button, which is going to be my cancel button. cancel btn, and here is going to say cancel, and the cancel property is going to be set to true. Okay, and the last button is going to be my creation button. So this is going to be my create there's button. Okay, and the caption will be create directories. Okay, I would also want to make sure that this is like the go ahead button. So I like to color those. I know it's not a standard practice, but nonetheless, you just make it a bit bigger. That's how our user form is going to look. So we're going to select our path, and then we'll create directories based on the lists that we select in our Excel file. Okay, let's go ahead and start adding some code. So I'm going to start with the cancel button. And if you double click on it, it's going to add the click event. And if you need other events, here have a drop down with all your items. And here have a drop down with all the events. So let's say if you want to add or the create there's button, it automatically adds the click event. But if I want to like enter event, then it's going to add it here. Just delete that. Okay, so for the cancel button, it's pretty much the simplest one. We're just gonna say unload me because we'll be loading the user form, and the cancel button just has to unload it. And I like to start with this one because it's easier now to test. When I open it, just hit close and it closes. Next, let's go ahead and prepare our select parent folder for directories. Okay, this button, I'm actually gonna use a formula, a function to do what I want this button to do. So before we write any code here, let's create a function. And to create a function, we just use function instead of sub. Sub is for subroutine, function is for function. And the difference is that functions return something. Okay, so our function is gonna be create get folder. And I'm gonna add a string, and I use tab to autocomplete. And the idea is that this will open up a pop-up window where we're going to select our path, and it's going to return it as a string, which we can then put in our selected path text box, and then we can use it to create our directories within this path. Okay, let's go back here, and you can do that by right-clicking and view code. For our get folder function, we're going to need to define a few variables, and we do that with dim. So dim folder as file dialog. You're going to need dim, let's call it s item, as string. And then we need to set our folder equal to application. This refers the whole application dot file dialog. And here we want the folder picker. So this is how you can also open files, pick files, but currently we want the folder picker. And then we're going to use the width to do some things with folder. So the idea is that you type width folder, and then at some point we have end width. And now we don't have to type folder every time. We can just start after that. So dot title is the title that is going to be showing on our browse screen. I'll select a parent folder. Then we want to change the button name, and I'm using tab to auto-populate, as I mentioned already. So let's say this is going to be use this folder. Then we want to disable allow multi-select because we just want to select one folder. And our initial file name, so the initial folder that we'll be in, is going to be derived from our application. And if you press Ctrl J, say I'm starting to write application, if you press Ctrl J, it's going to show you the auto completion. Tab.default file path. It's probably going to go into my documents or something like that. And then we also want to do some error checking. So if.show, and then it's going to show different than -1, then we want to go to next code. Next code. And if this doesn't happen, so if we have no issue, then our S item is going to be our selected items, and we want the first selected item because we already made sure that we only allow single select. So the next thing we want to do is do this next code bit, and it's going to just say get folder equals S item and set folder equals nothing. What this whole thing pretty much does is it allows us to browse and select a folder, and then it's gonna return this string, this S item that we set here, as our function result. Now that we have this, we can go ahead and finish our browse button. And all we want to do here is we want to get our path text box, Control J to show it, tab to fill it, and we want to set the text property to equal get folder. And as soon as I move away from this line, you can see how it capitalized it here. This means that my whole line is correct. Let's see if this thing runs. So select parent folder for directories. And as you can see, it opened up the documents folder. This is the folder where I want this to be as part of our due diligence. So I'm just gonna copy this, paste it here. Okay, and use this folder. And you can see that it got the folder path here, but nothing will happen right now. Let's go ahead and write our code to create directories. We're gonna need a few variables here as well, dim sls range, okay, and dim counter as integer. I want to show how many items I have processed, and this is going to be my counter, and I need to reset that every time I run the macro. So I'm going to start with counter equals 0. Before we start creating folders, we want to make sure that the folder path here actually exists, just to have some error checking in place. We're going to need another function for that. Let's define it here above. So it's going to be folder exists, and it's going to take a folder property as string, and it's going to return a boolean. So it's going to return either true or false based on the fact that this folder either exists or doesn't. So we want to try to open the folder pretty much. So dir folder, and it's a VB directory, and we're going to check if this equals to nothing, then the folder doesn't exist. So if this equals to nothing, then folder exists, and by setting this, we pretty much set what the function will return. It's going to be false, else folder exists is going to be true. So we try to open the directory. If it's nothing, then it doesn't exist. If it's something else, then it exists. Moving back here to our create dirs button, we're gonna check if folder exists, and we're gonna provide the path text box dot text as the folder path. So if this equals false, or path text box, the text equals nothing. So we want to see either if this folder doesn't exist or the path is not provided. Then we want to provide a message box, and this message box is going to say, the prompt is going to be please select a parent folder. It's going to be an error message, so the style will be VB critical, and the caption at the top is going to be no folder selected. If this happens, we also want to exit the sub to make sure that we don't try to create any folders. This is where this check ends, so we're going to add an end if. The next thing we want to make sure is that the selection is a range, so what we have selected within our Excel file. this thing here is a range because let's say somebody added an image or something like that. If we selected that, this will throw an error. So we're gonna check if the type name of the selection, and selection is an Excel keyword that refers to the current selection. So if the type of our selection is a range, then we want to set our SL, our variable here that we created, to be equal to selection. And then we're gonna close this if. If that's not the case, we want to give an error message. So we're gonna have else here as well. And it's gonna be another message box, and it's gonna exit the sub again. So I'll just copy it from here, paste it, and here we're gonna have please use a valid selection. And here it's gonna say selection error. Exit the sub, and this is our second check. So first we make sure that the path provided is valid, and then we make sure that the selection is also valid. Now that we have done that, we can just go ahead and loop through all the selected cells and create the folders themselves. So for each cell, and we can use anything here in SL. So pretty much this would loop each element of our selection, which is a range, and the elements are cells. So for each cell in SL, and we need to end this with next cell. Okay, so what we're gonna do with each cell? We're gonna check just to make sure that it's not empty. So if it's empty, then pretty much gonna do nothing with this cell. Else if folder exists, we want to make sure that we're not recreating and rewriting folders. So if folder exists, and here we're gonna have the path text box dot text. This is our parent folder, concatenated with a dash, and again with our cell dot value. So if this folder in this cell combined with the path where we want to create all the folders, if this exists, then again we do nothing. Folder exists already. And if those are not the case, so if it's if it has something, it's a name of a folder, and it doesn't exist, then we want to create our folder. We just close this if, and we're gonna use the make dir function, and we're gonna give the same thing, path text box dot text and our dash and our cell dot value. Okay, and the last thing to do is update our counter by adding 1 to it. Once we're done with looping through all the cells here, I just want to show a message box saying how many folders were created. So I'm gonna have a message box, counter, and folders successfully created. It's gonna be a VB OK, and the title is gonna be done. Once this is all done, the only thing that's left to do is to unload our form. Okay, so this is pretty much all the code that we need to execute this macro. And then there's one last thing to do is how are we gonna show this form? So what I'm gonna do is in my personal Excel USB, I'm gonna open module 1 where we had our recorded macro. I'm gonna remove all that. And here we're just gonna type sup create folders form sup. OK, Okay, and all this is going to do is create folders dot show. Okay, now that we have that, what we can do is we can go to customize the ribbon. Go here, we can create a new tab, and we can rename this new tab to tools, or a new group can be folder tools, and let's pick an icon, this one. Okay, and we can add our macro within this folder. We can just go ahead to macros, and here it is, personal XOSB, create folders from. Okay, just add it here and maybe rename it and pick an icon. So let's go ahead with the same icon, and it's going to be create folders. Okay. Okay, and now in our tools tab we have create folders, and if we run it, it's gonna open our user form. Let's test it. So I'm gonna select all those folders here, and make sure to have, let's say if you're doing subfolders, make sure to have them after the main folder, because if you just run it from here, this won't work. That's why my lists are always like that, and it's a common way to do it. Okay, so create folders, select path. Let's go ahead and select the same path that we have here. Okay, this is gonna be my folder. Create directories, 27 folders successfully created. Okay, let's go back here, and we can see all the folders here. So we have our finance folder with all the subfolders within it, revenue, balance sheet, and everything, and that's pretty much it. Now we can go ahead and start piling files here and do our due diligence. Okay guys, thank you for watching. So that was it, our macro to create a folder structure based on a list of folders and subfolders in Excel. And I gotta say, I love those projects where I get to pick something that's bothering me pretty much, because it takes maybe it takes just 2 minutes, but you have to do it over and over, and it's a repetitive action that I quite dislike. So it's really fun to get a problem like that, and just try to do a fast prototype of an Excel macro that would do that for me. And I've gone into the habit of always having a user form, and I gotta say that the thing that this gives me is that right now this macro could have been just you run the macro, you get a pop-up to select the destination, and then it does everything. But by having the user form, you can kind of outline the steps. So when I, let's say, don't use it for a few months, and I go back and decide to use it, if it's just the code, I have to probably go into the code and see how it works. And that's how I justify having user forms for everything. Okay, thank you guys for watching. I hope you learned something, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Give it a thumbs up if you did. Also, don't forget to subscribe if you're not already, and maybe even punch the bell icon to receive notifications every time I upload a new video. Till then, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Part of our series to basically so give it a thumbs up if you did. Okay, so yep, that's